What's up, meta nerds? Today's video is all about the Low Altitude Assault Transport, or the LAAT. This one was highly recommended, and I don't know about you guys, but it's one of my favorite ships in all of Star Wars. Some people say it looks like a flying minivan, but I think it's pretty badass, so let's jump right into it. The LAAT was perhaps the most iconic vehicle in the entire Grand Army of the Republic. This gunship was manufactured by Rothana Heavy Engineering. They were a subsidiary company underneath Kuat Drive Yards, the company that would end up producing a whole bunch of parts for TIE fighters and AT-ATs. But Rothana Heavy Engineering specialized in doing these kinds of secret projects on their facilities out in wild space. In the year 31 BBY, they got a huge order from some Kaminoans to create war machines for the newly created clone troopers. Without asking too many questions, they set to work designing one of the greatest gunships of all time. They were also the ones that created the awesome ATTE. Once fully assembled, the LAAT was 17.4 meters long, and its wingspan was 17 meters across, meaning that an LAAT was wider than a school bus, and almost as wide as 3 TIE fighters. At 6.1 meters tall, the LAAT stood about the same height as a 2-story building. To have a real aircraft to compare it to, I chose the MIL Mi-24. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's a large helicopter gunship that also could work to transport troops. You can see that the Russian helicopter has a top speed of 208 miles an hour, whereas the LAAT is able to reach speeds of 385 miles an hour. To have another Star Wars ship to compare it to, the TIE Fighter had a top speed of 745 miles an hour, making it about twice as fast as the LAAT. It used repulsor lift technology to get up in the air, and it could stay in combat for up to 8 hours before it ran out of fuel. What made it really special was just how much it could carry, and how many weapons were packed into this thing. Each LAAT could carry 30 clone troopers into battle, not including its crew, which was 1 pilot, 1 co-pilot, and 2 to 4 gunners depending on how intense they thought the battle would be. In addition to this, each LAAT was equipped with an IM-6 medical droid and could carry up to 4 speeder bikes. To make sure that the Republic got the most out of this carry capacity, they developed a pretty ingenious system. A Venator-class Star Destroyer would send out all of its LAATs in waves, and a single wave of LAATs was capable of dropping off 2,000 troops into the battlefield at once. All the LAAT had to do after this was just safely make it back to the Star Destroyer, pick up another 2,000, and just repeat this process until the enemy was overwhelmed. On top of this, the LAAT did not just drop off clones, but it also dropped off all kinds of armored vehicles, like the ATTE and the stun cannon tank. But of course, this thing was a lot more than just a transport. It was a very capable assault gunship. Like I said, there are a ton of weapons crammed into the LAAT, so let's start at the nose of the ship and work our way back. First up, we have a pair of laser cannons. Their ball turret design allowed them to aim in all kinds of directions, making it so that the co-pilot, who also doubled as a gunner, could follow the enemy as the gunship flew by. And although the smallest weapon on here, it still had a respectable punch, with each shot delivering up to 5 gigajoules of energy. And I think it's important you understand just how powerful that is. A real-world example would be that an average lightning bolt is also 5 gigajoules of energy, meaning that its weakest gun shoots lightning bolts. Next, we have the bubble turrets on each side. These were gunned by a clone trooper that sat inside of each of these bubble turrets, and that actually swung and was suspended out over the side of the LAAT. Probably the scariest and coolest thing a clone trooper could do. Now, these bubble turrets are the exact same weapon as the ones on the wings of the LAAT, and these were remote controlled by the co-pilot, with a pretty cool feature that it had 2 dishes, one on the top and one on the bottom, so that it could target 2 different enemies while also not cutting through its own wing. And each of these 4 bubble turrets fired the exact same type of bolt. It was described as a composite beam pinpoint laser. Basically, it was a bunch of smaller beams that all came together to a point to make one big larger beam, kind of like what we see in the Death Star. And this beam was even stronger than the ones in the front of the cannon. This composite beam was the equivalent of 200 lightning bolts. Also on each wing was a set of 4 air-to-air rockets. But these could also be used on land targets, as they're what was used to take out all those Hailfire tanks back on the Battle of Geonosis. Moving to the rear of the ship, we have another laser cannon, which is identical to the 2 in the front. And saving the best for last, on the top of the LAAT, we have 2 mass driver missile launchers. What's really cool is that this thing could fire a wide array of missiles. That way they could customize it for certain missions. Some of their options were missiles that simply had a omnidirectional blast, meaning it would just explode in all directions. Some would explode in like a fan or a straight beam. Some of them dispersed antimatter, while some generated an electromagnetic pulse. And some really strange variants would deploy a burst of radiation or just really intense concentrated heat. What's more is that they can carry a total of 60 rockets, 30 for each side. And as you can see, they were all stored where the wing meets the fuselage of the ship, and were delivered into the mass driver via a simple belt system. All of these features made the LAAT one of the most important parts of the Grand Army of the Republic. 10 years before the Clone Wars, the LAAT was used just to transport prisoners, but it was the Battle of Geonosis in which the LAAT saw its first combat. It easily took out the trade union's hard cell class transports, and we see as it took out Hailfire droids and deployed many ATTEs. It definitely earned the respect of the clone troopers and the Jedi. And it was one of the most frequently used vehicles during the Clone Wars. But what's even more interesting is that it outlived the Republic and saw use during the Galactic Civil War. Former Jedi General Rom Koda was able to use some LAAT against the Imperial forces on the planet Felucia, and later the Rebel Alliance found some LAATs and was able to repair them so that they were functional. And even Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles both ran into LAATs on their adventures. But that's where its history ends. But before we go, I definitely want to go over some cool facts and behind the scenes stuff. First one is just pretty funny. Apparently Poggle the Lesser was so impressed at the Battle of Geonosis that he wanted an LAAT for himself. And there were some cool features that I didn't mention yet. If the LAAT crash landed and was positioned in a way that the clone troopers were unable to open the door, it had little explosives on the rails so that the sliding door could explode off. That way the clone troopers weren't trapped inside. Another safety feature was that the cockpit could separate from the main body of the LAAT. This front clamp would release and eject the pilot and co-pilot. Now in their little escape pod, they could safely navigate away from the burning gunship full of 60 missiles. And I wanted to point out that there's a reason why it had both laser and rocket systems. Lasers were great because once you fired at an enemy, they would hit them almost instantly, whereas rockets were slower, but could achieve what's called over-the-horizon shots, meaning rockets don't have to fire in a straight line, like a laser would, but they can curve around obstacles. And by using missiles, they also had a wider range of ordnances that they could drop on their enemies. Some behind-the-scenes facts are that the original concept art for the LAAT was this, which ended up being the inspiration for the HMP droid gunship. And have you ever noticed all the cool nose art that's on LAATs? This was actually inspired by a bunch of World War II fighter planes. And throughout the Clone Wars TV show, we see a ton of different LAAT nose arts. And in an unfinished episode, Anakin is unable to control his anger in front of Obi-Wan when he sees that some of the clone troopers took a liking to a particular senator from Naboo. Well, that's it for the Low Altitude Assault Transport, also known as the LAAT. Hope you liked this video, and if you did, it would really help us out if you could leave a like down below. Make sure you vote in the poll and leave a comment below if I missed any cool facts about the LAAT. You can also make suggestions for future videos. Be sure to subscribe because we're making videos like this every single day. And if you want to learn even more about Star Wars, there's tons of free stuff online. Be sure to check out Wikipedia, YouTube, and other playlists. But if you want to get your hands on some of the source material, be sure to click on our Amazon link in the description below. The link is to one book in particular, but be sure to browse around and see if you find anything you like. Any purchase that you make through that link shoots us back a small percentage so that we can help Meta Nerds grow to the point that maybe we can do this full time one day. But more important than all of that, remember, the Force will be with you. Unless, you're hit by like one of those laser things on a gunship. In which case, I hear it's as strong as lightning. So you're probably gonna be dead. But besides that, always. And now some bloopers while you think about what to watch next. It was first developed by Roxana. Roxanne! And was almost as wide as tree tri-fighters. And these smaller beams would come to make a bigger beam, which was bigger.